Oil. Wars have been fought over it, countries formed and built around it, and economies supported by it. It is responsible for the modernization and development of our world. Oil has been at the center of every first world country's development and is the main export of the Middle East, a region rich in oil deposits. It was in this part of the world that the exploration for oil began. An Englishman named William Darcy had obtained a license to search for oil in Persia in 1901. He sent explorer George Reynolds, who searched for 7 years. Reynolds eventually found what he was looking for in a region known as the Zagros Mountains of western Persia. The discovery of oil in the Middle East led to one of the greatest explorations of any part of the world, in the hopes of finding quantities of oil to sell. Through this exploration, rich Western cultures first encountered the Middle East. These encounters led to a new market and many new business opportunities. Once the oil was found and drilled, the exchange of this product allowed for the beginning of World War I, fueled many Western economies, and led to the exchange of stocks, land, permits, and huge corporations between Saudi landowners and Western businessmen. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, many countries in the Western Hemisphere were rapidly industrializing. These countries soon discovered how truly vital and essential oil was in their modernization. Oil could be used to power anything from lighting and heating homes to powering machines as powerful as cars, boats, and after 1903, planes. Countries began to search for abundant sources of oil. In 1890, French geologist Jacques de Morgan published a paper on the abundances of oil seeps in western Iran. This attracted many entrepreneurs to the Middle East in hopes of discovering oil. Recognizing that the land they owned was now valued and sought after by Western powers, a representative was sent from the Middle East, Kitabshi Khan, in 1889 to the Paris Exposition, or the World's Fair, and spoke with Western investors and businessmen about the endless oil opportunities in the Middle East. Interest in the region first started after Kitabshi Khan met with investors on the possibility of purchasing land in the area in attempts to find oil. This initial meeting grabbed the attention of William Darcy, an extremely wealthy English investor who had previous investments in lucrative Australian gold mines. A decade later, in 1901, Darcy sent his agent, Alfred L. Marriott, together with Kitabshi Khan to Tehran, the capital of Iran, to negotiate for a concession from the Persian government. After receiving backing from the government, Darcy sent George Reynolds to explore the region. George Bernard Reynolds, an Englishman who graduated from the Royal Indian Engineering College and also served in India as a geologist. As a self-taught man who had drilled in the Dutch oil fields of Sumatra, he was qualified for leading this expedition. Working conditions in western Iran, as Reynolds soon learned, were harsh. The climate was hot, the drill sites were remote, and the local tribesmen were suspicious of foreigners in their territories, did not care about government concessions. Reynolds had to hire local laborers and security guards to pay tribal chiefs for their cooperation. He also put together a technical team of Polish and Canadian drillers, an Indian doctor, and an American engineer, C.B. Rosenplanter, as his deputy. Together they searched for 7 long years and never found seeps large enough to extract oil worth selling. With the company facing bankruptcy and oil still not found, the call was made to drill one last time in a promising region of the Zagros mountain range. On May 26, 1908, after drilling 1,000 feet down, a large geyser of oil shot into the air, signifying that a large well had been struck. The site was so remote that it took 5 days before Darcy got word by telegram in England. "If this is true," he replied, "all our troubles are over." It was indeed true, and more wells hit oil elsewhere in Persia, including a huge one in September. These wells now meant that the team had enough oil to sell commercially. The discovery of oil brought together 2 completely different cultures, the powerful Western world, now showing interest in the offerings of Middle Eastern oil. Before the discovery, the Middle East's largest source of income was from religious pilgrimages into the region. Once oil was discovered, the amount of pilgrims entering the Middle East significantly dropped from around 100,000 to 40,000, and a new group of people started to pop up in the region. Rich Western powers began sending representatives, explorers, and geologists to the region. At first, both American and English explorers and mining sites were under close watch from the natives and governments. Both parties were skeptical about Western involvement in the region. Tribe members would often be seen in and around drill sites, never attacking but always with a watchful eye over the men. On the other, not-so-peaceful side, during World War I, England, France, and Germany all fought major battles over these oil pipelines. Whoever controlled these pipes would be able to support one of the strongest armies the world had ever seen. The Allies eventually pushed the Germans out of the area, only to have to do it all over again during World War II. On the diplomatic side of the encounter between the West and Middle East, the ties that America formed with Saudi Arabia and other countries are still strong today. The United States has fought for decades in the Middle East, all in the effort to protect our trade interests in the region. With the outbreak of both World Wars, then the Gulf War, American political operations in the region shaped the developments that led to the Iranian Revolution in 1979 and the current Middle Eastern power situation. Not only were new political ties formed, but an entirely new market was created as well. Now that oil had been discovered in quantities fit for commercial use, the market blew up. Initial public offering of stock shares of Darcy's Oil sold out in 30 minutes in London. People stood 5 deep around the tellers' cages to buy shares in Glasgow. This then allowed for an influx in the automobile industry. Between 1914 and 1920, the number of registered cars jumped from 1.8 to 9.2 million, not to mention the effect of the oil trade on the possibility of war and the advancements it allowed. When oil first went on the market, the English Parliament secretly bought up 50% of the company's stock. First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, was the mastermind behind this with the intention to modernize English forces. With the new stock and the easy access to Persian oil, the entire English fleet was converted from coal to oil, allowing for faster, stronger engines. This exchange in oil between the East and the West also allowed for more practical field transportations. Prior to the discovery of oil, horses were used on the front line. Horses were costly. They ate 10 times as much as a man. When oil arrived, however, transport vehicles were limited only by terrain, and airplanes, it soon discovered, could surmount even that obstacle. America laid its first large claim in 1932 with the Bahrain oil field. It was the first all-American oil venture in the Middle East, and the first time America could get oil without a middleman. This direct exchange allowed America to fuel its army, navy, and factories. This was especially important with the upcoming World War. America's exchange did not stop there, though. U.S. investments in the region then led to the Gulf War in the late 20th century, as well as the Middle East being placed as a national interest and as an area that, if attacked, would be seen as an act of war on the U.S. Oil is one of the most valued natural resources traded today. The discovery of oil directly allowed for and impacted global modernization, the world wars, and an industrial boom. Right after its discovery, World War I breaking out, leading to oil becoming the indispensable material for laying runways, the manufacturing of synthetic rubber for tires, and the distilling into gasoline for use in trucks, tanks, jeeps, and airplanes. And not to mention the need for oil as a lubricant for guns and machinery. By 1945, 2 English oil companies alone were producing 2 billion gallons of oil each year, allowing for the English Navy, Air Force, and Army to successfully push back German forces. America enters the picture in the early 1930s when Standard Oil sent representatives into Saudi Arabia to explore for oil wells. The U.S. interest in eventual trade in the region had a sort of double-edged sword effect, both socially and politically, in both the Middle East and the United States. While oil trade did drastically boost the average GDP of many countries in the Middle East and also fueled the rapid industrialization of the United States, it proved to be a major hinder to democracy in the Middle East. Countries whose only real source of income was trade and investments were far less likely to regard human rights and much more likely to use repressive measures to ensure domestic stability. This led to many different uprisings and rebellions in the Middle East. The rise of radical Islam and events such as 9/11 or the London underground bombings can also be indirectly linked to the oil trade between the Middle East and the rest of the world. The United States imported approximately 9 million barrels of oil per day in 2014. That is equal to $450 billion a year. This exchange is responsible for the modernization of the Middle East and the running of America and other powerful countries. This world-changing exchange all started with the exploration of the Middle East, the oil that was found there, and the encounters that resulted from it.